So in the past two videos, I've discussed how it seems that human beings have this intuitive recognition that the world is not the way that it's supposed to be. All of us realize that the world's broken, it's evil, which suggests that there's a way that the world is supposed to be. And I took us into Genesis 1 and showed you there how human beings were created in the image of God. We were created to reflect who God is in the midst of his creation. And then in the second video, talked about how it is that we fell away from that purpose and design for our lives. Essentially, that human beings opted for trying to be gods themselves rather than being the creatures that God created them to be, falling prey to the temptation of the serpent, Satan. Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil and decided that they were going to try to live life on their own terms rather than on God's terms. And so they were cast out of the garden. Death is introduced to humanity, and sin becomes a characteristic of human nature. Not that it's actually something that belongs to human nature, but it's something that has become attached to human nature so that all human beings are sinners. We're all sinful. Now, this leads us to consider, how do we fix this problem, and what sort of proposals have been put forward in our world. As we look around at the efforts that we do see around us, we'll notice how they fall far short of actually providing any real solutions. One solution that is often reached for is war. This idea that the problem with our world is not within you or me, it's those other people. And that if we just simply defeat our enemies, then everything will be great in the world. Now, we've seen wars upon wars for ages, and none of them have produced that kind of result. Some might say, well, politics is the solution, which may seem hilarious just at the outset of even suggesting that, because we've experienced how politics never achieves the ideals that we hope for. People have these utopian visions of what the government can do for us, and they never actually reach those promises. There's just a basic ineptitude that seems to characterize human governments, and also just evil, injustice. And so politics hasn't been able to solve the problems of humanity. Material prosperity, the idea of if we just make people richer, that will fix our problems. That too, a failed solution. It just seems to, the more money is around, the more it seems to just breed corruption and vices and other different kinds of injustices. It fuels greed rather than generosity and charity towards others. Not that money's bad. Money's not bad. But the love of money is the root of all evil. And so if we fix our hope and affections on that, that's where problems arise. Some have proposed that, well, if we just get the right medical technology in place, we can perpetuate human life, we can get rid of disease, all sorts of wonderful things. And medicine does some wonderful things for us, but it falls short of addressing the real issue at heart. Yes, it can deal with some of the frailties of our body, but it doesn't actually touch the human heart. It doesn't touch who we are as human beings. It doesn't reckon with that sin problem. Technology, some people think if we just advance as a society in terms of what we can do with technology, that everything's going to become great. But that usually instead introduces new problems. It's, as we've seen in the age of social media, technology has a way of dividing us. It multiplies challenges and introduces the problem of thinking through, yeah, we could do these things, but should we do them? And very often we just go ahead and deploy technologies without thinking about the consequences they will have upon humanity. Other people have suggested, well, it's just we need people to be better educated. And if we educate people, then we will achieve true civility and peace in our world. Once again, though, this fails to adequately deal with the human heart. The fact of the matter is that there's been people who have been highly intelligent, very smart, and who have been absolute devils. So education is not a solution either. And beyond this, we can look to the biblical revelation, what God has to say about this. And even when human beings know what they should do according to God's law, just knowing that has not been sufficient for us mending our ways. The Apostle Paul provides testimony of this in Romans 3, verses 10 through 20, quoting the Old Testament. He's quoting from the Psalms, Proverbs, Isaiah, Jeremiah. He says this, "As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands, there is no one who seeks God. All have turned away, they have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. Their throats are open graves, their tongues practice deceit. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery mark their ways. In the way of peace they do not know. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin." So, apart from God's law, human beings certainly aren't righteous. But what Paul is saying here is that even with the knowledge of the law, and he was especially thinking here of the Jewish people who had received God's law, that knowledge, that gift of knowing God's wisdom for human life, has only served to indict us more because we know what we're supposed to do, and yet we do not do those things. And so this leads us to notice that there's really kind of three problems at hand here that we have to reckon with if we're going to really address the human situation completely. First, there's the problem of injustice. The fact that we have done things that are evil, that are wrong. Not just against other people, that's one thing, that's one aspect to be dealt with, but also the injustice, the wrong things that we have done against God and disobeying his commands and defying his rule in favor of our rule, making ourselves our own gods. Now, some have suggested, well, maybe I can just do more good things than bad things. But there's something that we have to recognize about good works. Good works are not extra credit. Good works are just the things that we're supposed to do. It's like living in obedience to the laws of the land. So if I spend my whole life and I don't rob a store, but one day I rob a store, I can't tell the police, well, I didn't, on my 32 years, I never robbed a store. And it was just this one year I decided to rob a store. And that doesn't make a difference. I've done something wrong and I need to answer for that. You can say the same thing about speeding. You're always driving down the road and maybe most of the time you're not breaking the speed limit. But that one time you do, very often you're going to pay a speeding ticket for that. Or at least there's grounds for you to pay the speeding ticket, especially if you're going way over the speed limit. It's the same thing with our good works. Those are just the things that we're supposed to do. They don't make up for the bad things that we've done. We still need to answer for the bad things that we've done. And if God does not hold us accountable for those things, then he's actually being unjust. And just so that we understand that that is in fact the standard, that we're supposed to be perfect. Again, we have to recall, who were we created to be? We were created to be God's image bearers. We were created to reflect who God is. So God is perfect. We too are supposed to be perfect. And Jesus testifies to this in his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:48. He says, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Now, this raises the question of how are we going to make amends then? If our good just can't outweigh our bad, how can we be justified before God? So that's the first problem, the problem of injustice. Then there's the problem of sin. Again, we're stubborn sinners. There's been this flaw that's attached itself to our natures because of Adam and Eve's rebellion. And it's such a deep flaw that no amount of self-help will perfect us. Yes, as you live your life, maybe you'll become a better person in some regards. But you're not perfect. It's still the case that you're not who you're supposed to be. And so this leaves us with the problem of how can we actually achieve lasting transformation, like true and perfect transformation, both of ourselves personally, but also globally. How can our world be rid of evil and perfected? And then lastly, there's the problem of death. Death comes for all of us. And while scientists and doctors might be trying to find ways to overcome death, no one has done that successfully. And instead we hear ideas about using technology, trying to extend our lives by trying to move our brains onto computer chips and things like that. Just very weird ideas. And it just demonstrates how strong of a curse this is. It's a curse that we can't overcome. So it's a question of who can end this curse of death that continues to reign over all of us. Now, other religions put forward various proposals, and I'm not going to get into all the particulars of each religion, but they have some things in common, which is most of them have a naive understanding of justice, so they kind of just opt for, well, we'll try to do more good than bad. And again, that's a very low view of the perfection that God actually requires, and it again fails to appreciate that doing good things is just what we're supposed to do. It's no bonus points or anything like that. As far as the sin problem, other religions basically just say try harder, just try, and yet it's never able to adequately deal with the issue of sin in our hearts. And then as far as the problem of death is concerned, very often it kind of skirts that issue, where instead of actually overcoming bodily death, some religions will just say, well, you just go up into a spiritual form of existence. So in thinking about these problems, the problem of injustice, the problem of sin, the problem of death, we are going to now move next to considering, how does Jesus Christ address those problems? How does he put himself forward as the solution, as the one who can truly fix us and fix our world? Thanks for watching this video. I encourage you to like it, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. This video is part of a series called Our Messed Up World That Jesus Can Fix. I encourage you to watch the other videos that have been posted. And I also want to invite you that if you live in the area of North Stitch or Rhode Island, to visit Rockland Community Church. Rockland Community Church is the ministry out of which Truth Rooted is presented. And we're going to be using these videos in our small groups in October. So if you want to get in on that conversation, would love to have you join us. Catch you in the next video.